And the footnote here says, though no longer the powerhouse that it once was, Reader's Digest has remained a reliable publication. When George W. Bush became president, he would install a top Reader's Digest executive, Kenneth Tomlinson, to lead the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, with the mandate to exorcise a perceived liberal slant, particularly at PBS. Continuing with the text, as the above excerpt shows, Osler seemed less interested in uncovering new information than investigating why new information continued to emerge. An extreme conservative and a reliable editorial customer for Hoover's propaganda wars, Osler apparently felt that the solution for the Reader's Digest editors was to reassure the American mainstream of Oswald's guilt. And looking at that footnote, Fulton Osler worked closely with Hoover and later as a senior editor at Reader's Digest with FBI Assistant Director Louis B. Nichols. So Reader's Digest is cozy with the FBI, as are all the people working for it apparently. The Digest editors decided it would be advisable to retain an outsider to write the book. An outsider. And they turned to Edward J. Epstein. Epstein had written his master's thesis at Harvard on the Kennedy assassination, as well as a book called Inquest, which was a comparatively mild critique of the Warren Commission's investigation. Epstein's skepticism, alleged skepticism of the Commission's conclusions regarding Oswald made him seem a credible expert to later argue the opposite, that Lee Harvey Oswald had indeed shot Kennedy, and moreover that he had done it as a Soviet agent. This was the version of the assassination tale told by James Jesus Angleton, the CIA's longtime head of security. It became the explanation preferred by hard-line Cold Warriors. That the Digest should adopt Angleton's account is not really that surprising, especially when one learns that the magazine's interest was at least to some degree externally stimulated. The magazine editors had been approached by Jamie Jameson, a CIA officer who had reportedly left the agency but now interacted with the media as a consultant to it. He arranged interviews with Soviet defectors and ghost-wrote articles for them. At this point, Jameson was ghostwriting a book by Yuri Nosenko, who had defected from the Soviet Union before Kennedy's assassination. Nosenko had originally claimed that Oswald had no ties to Soviet intelligence, but had now reversed himself. Jameson suggested to the Digest editors that they publish a new book about the Kennedy assassination, one in which Nosenko's new claims about Oswald as a Soviet agent would play a central role. So the reason Reader's Digest is pursuing this is because some CIA guy suggested it. As noted above in CIA debriefings, Nosenko had originally insisted that the KGB had no ties to Oswald. The defector stuck with that story despite an unusually long and harsh period of interrogation ordered by Angleton. Nosenko had insisted that the Soviets considered Oswald an odd duck and possible CIA double agent during his residency in the Soviet Union. The KGB concluded Oswald had no operational usefulness to the Soviet spy program. Epstein, however, citing confidential, unnamed sources and classified materials, asserted that Nosenko himself was a double agent who had defected to the United States in order to provide a cover story for Oswald, who Epstein concluded was a Soviet agent too. The problem with Epstein's theory, which he revealed later in his own writings, was that his source for most of this was none other than Angleton, the CIA's longtime chief of counterespionage, who had been fired by then-director William Colby. And the footnote for this is, Epstein himself admitted that Angleton was a key source 2 years after the counterintelligence chief's death. So, Epstein is friendly with the FBI, and he's friendly with the CIA, and he's friendly with James Angleton. Angleton was considered paranoid by many people in the agency. He saw Russian moles everywhere. He had been a staunch Dulles loyalist. He even carried Dulles' ashes away from Dulles' funeral service. Epstein has claimed that he was reluctant to take on the new JFK assassination book project. He did not say why and did not respond to a telephone and email messages from me, this is Russ Baker speaking, seeking more information. But once he acquiesced to Oswald's request, he worked quickly. He managed to publish Legend, The Secret World of Lee Harvey Oswald in 1978, beating the House Select Committee on Assassinations to the punch and perhaps partially influencing its conclusions. And maybe that's the point. Maybe they wanted to redefine the story before the HSCA had a chance to do anything. With the assistance of 2 Reader's Digest staffers, and that would be Pamela Butler and Henry Hurt, Epstein was to contact virtually every witness of interest, thereby getting to them just ahead of House investigators. Among these was Oswald's shipboard roommate from his initial passage to Russia, who coincidentally was from the Bush hometown of Midland, Texas. The roommate, Billy Joe Lord, had just sent a letter to President Jimmy Carter, asserting that there was a conspiracy involving the CIA and FBI. Lord would later complain to the FBI that Epstein's team tried to intimidate him into cooperating. He said the Digest researchers even sought to exert pressure by invoking the Bushes and also Jimmy Allison, Poppy's political lieutenant, who had by then returned to Midland. Allison was the publisher of the local daily where Lord worked. For almost a year, Epstein traveled the world with unusual access to top CIA officials. He even stayed as a guest of former CIA director-turned-ambassador Richard Helms in Tehran, Iran. This all ties in so well with what Billy Lord said about Iranian people coming to his house and about the CIA and the FBI and Epstein. He also talked with Angleton at his home in McLean, Virginia, and inspected his famous orchid collection. On April 22, 1966, according to Epstein, he conducted a brief interview with George de Mohrenschildt, but found him less than forthcoming, and of course de Mohrenschildt was just after that found shot to death with a shotgun. So Edward J. Epstein, the guy who's behind this project that's pressuring, even intimidating Billy Joel Lord to be interviewed by them, he and his sponsor, Reader's Digest, have close ties to George Bush, the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, the CIA, James Angleton, Wesley Liebler, and probably a few I've left out. I think the implication here is that they're trying to talk to people, and they have a special interest in Billy Joel Lord, and they're probably wondering if he knows something about Oswald that they want to know about before Billy Joe Lord talks to the HSCA. Now, maybe Lord doesn't know anything. Maybe it's not that the guy on the ship wasn't really Oswald. I don't know. But I think that's why they pressure Billy Joe Lord to speak with them. And I think one possible explanation is that it wasn't really Oswald on the Marion Lykes, that it was somebody else, and they're afraid Billy Joe Lord, because he had the greatest exposure to Oswald on this trip, they're afraid maybe that he's going to say it was somebody else. So I think when you consider the circumstances of the trip from the original documents, and also when you consider that Edward J. Epstein and his crew, with their connections, are trying to pressure Lord into talking before the HSCA got a hold of him, I think it's a reasonable possibility that the man on the Marion Lykes claiming to be Oswald was actually somebody else.